He keeps a list of 5 Hollywood stars he flat out hates. These aren't petty feuds or professional disagreements. We are talking wild betrayals, backstabbing friendships, and off-screen showdowns more intense than Rocky ever threw. Which actor played him at the peak of his fame, and who almost ended up in a real-life fistfight with Stallone on set? Join us as we uncover Sylvester Stallone most hated actors. Number 5. Richard Gere. Back in 1974, Hollywood was full of hungry young actors all trying to catch a break. 2 of them were Sylvester Stallone and Richard Gere. They weren't famous yet, just a couple of guys chasing screen time in a low-budget movie called The Lords of Flatbush. But what happened during filming would kick off a feud that lasted for decades, all because of a sandwich. The movie itself was meant to be a throwback to life in 1950s Brooklyn. Stallone had actually co-written the script, pulling from his own experiences growing up in Hell's Kitchen. For him, this wasn't just another acting job. It was personal. He was playing Stanley Rosiello, the tough guy with a hidden soft side. Stallone had been grinding it out in the industry for years, and this was his shot to prove he could lead a film. Gere, on the other hand, came from a totally different background. He was trained in theater, very methodical and precise. He'd studied acting seriously, thought through every line, every gesture. He was cast as Chico Tyrell, another one of the main guys in the gang. The role wasn't complicated, but their styles couldn't have been more different. Right away, the two clashed. Stallone acted from the gut, raw and instinctive. Gere liked to analyze everything. It might have worked under different circumstances, but this wasn't a big studio production. The budget was tiny, the schedule was tight, and the whole set was a pressure cooker. Everyone was already tense, hoping this little film might actually get noticed. Then came the scene that blew everything up. It was supposed to be a simple car scene. All 4 leads were crammed into a car, running lines and getting ready to shoot. Lunch had just wrapped, nothing fancy, just sandwiches from craft services. And that's where things went sideways. Gere, sitting next to Stallone in the car, was eating one of those sandwiches, loaded with mustard. At some point, a glob of mustard slipped out and landed right on Stallone's pants. Not a huge deal, right? Well, not if tensions hadn't already been sky high. Without saying a word, Stallone snapped. He elbowed Gere in the head, hard, and then grabbed him and shoved him right out of the car. Just tossed him onto the pavement like it was nothing. Everything stopped. The set went dead quiet. Nobody knew what to do. Was this part of the scene? Was it a real fight? Either way, it was clear. These two couldn't work together. The director and producers had a choice to make. Keeping both actors would have meant daily chaos, but firing one meant reshoots, lost money, and more delays. In the end, they sided with Stallone. Gere was out. His role was recast. His scenes were red-hot, and the official excuse was creative differences. But everyone on that set knew better. Stallone had made it clear. This was his movie, and anyone who crossed him was out. For Gere, it was a humiliating way to get fired. It wasn't because he couldn't act or wasn't right for the role. It was because of a mustard stain and Stallone's explosive temper. And in an industry as small and gossipy as Hollywood, word got around fast. Gere never forgot it. That moment stuck with him. Stallone, meanwhile, came out of it looking like the alpha, someone who didn't mess around when it came to protecting his projects. But that came with a price. He'd shown he could be hot-headed, even petty, and not everyone was going to want to deal with that. Still, the message was clear. He wasn't just another actor. He was the boss. Years later, both men became huge stars. Stallone, of course, hit it big with Rocky, and Gere went on to do American Gigolo and An Officer and a Gentleman. But that mustard moment never really faded. It was the beginning of a long, quiet grudge that simmered behind the scenes for years. And it's pretty wild when thinking about it. 2 future icons of Hollywood, feuding over a mustard-stained pair of pants in the back of a cramped car. But sometimes that's all it takes. One small spark to light a fire that burns for decades. Some Hollywood beefs start over bruised egos or personal drama. But what happens when the whole thing is really just about money? Number 4. Bruce Willis. Sylvester Stallone and Bruce Willis used to be tight. They were part of that small group of guys who completely ruled action movies in the 80s and 90s. Stallone had Rocky and Rambo. Willis had Die Hard. Between them, they'd basically defined what a tough guy looked like on screen for a whole generation. By the time 2010 rolled around, though, things had changed. Both of them were getting older, and the roles they used to land without blinking were getting harder to come by. The action genre had shifted, and the days of muscle-bound heroes blowing stuff up were fading. That's when Stallone came up with the idea for The Expendables, a kind of throwback movie packed with old-school action stars. It wasn't just another gig. For Stallone, this was personal. It was about honoring the golden era of action films and giving the legends one last moment to shine. The first Expendables movie did great. Audiences loved it. It pulled in over $270 million. And suddenly there was this renewed excitement around seeing the old action stars back together again. The second one did even better. It felt like the beginning of a whole new chapter, like they'd found a way to keep the fire going without pretending they were still in their 30s. Willis was part of it from the start. He played a CIA guy named Church, not a huge role, but he brought a certain weight to the team. Behind the scenes, he seemed to get what Stallone was going for. It was about camaraderie, loyalty, and throwing it back to the days when they were all in their prime. But when it came time to make The Expendables 3, things got messy. Stallone was pumped. He wanted to make it bigger, tighter, better. He was trying to bring in even more legends, Harrison Ford, maybe a few surprise cameos. Everything was lining up. Then came the talks with Willis. And that's where it all started to fall apart. Willis's team came back with a number that shocked everyone. $4 million for 4 days of work. Basically $1 million a day. No negotiation, no wiggle room. Just pay up or we're out. Now, this is Hollywood, right? Ridiculous paychecks aren't exactly new. But this one hit different. These movies had worked so far because everyone was willing to take a little less. It wasn't about the paycheck, it was about the vibe. The whole point was that it wasn't just about the money. It was about being part of something cool with the old crew. Willis's demand felt like he didn't care about any of that. Stallone saw it as more than just a number. To him, it was a slap in the face. He'd built this whole thing around the idea of brotherhood, and now one of the original guys was turning it into a business deal. They tried to talk it out, hoping Willis would meet them halfway. But he wouldn't budge. So Stallone had to choose. Give in or stand his ground. He stood his ground. Willis was out. They rewrote the script, cut his character, and brought in Harrison Ford instead. Ford showed up excited, professional, and ready to roll. Basically everything Stallone felt Willis hadn't been. But Stallone didn't stop there. He went public. He straight up called Willis greedy and lazy in interviews, which, for Hollywood, is wild. Usually, people keep stuff like that behind closed doors. Not Stallone. He made it clear he wasn't afraid to burn that bridge. The fallout was brutal. Suddenly, Willis had this label attached to him, hard to work with, all about the money, disconnected from the everyman charm that made John McClane such a legend. People in the industry started whispering. Fans noticed his absence in The Expendables 3, and rumors started flying. Stallone, meanwhile, stuck to his guns. He'd made it clear that The Expendables wasn't just another paycheck. It was a passion project, and anyone who couldn't respect that had no place being there. Expendables 3 still made decent money, over $200 million, but the vibe had definitely shifted. The shift was obvious. That whole brotherhood vibe had cracked, and even though the series kept moving forward, something felt off, like the heart of it had faded. At the end of the day, this wasn't just a contract dispute. It was a friendship, or at least a working relationship, falling apart in real time. All over 4 days and some mustard-level greed. But if Stallone thought Bruce Willis was greedy, wait until you hear about the friendship betrayal that shattered him completely. What happens when your closest friend becomes your worst enemy? Number 3. Eddie Murphy. Back in the late 80s, Sylvester Stallone and Eddie Murphy were at the top of their game. You couldn't go to the movies without seeing one of their names on a poster. Stallone was the king of action with Rocky and Rambo, and Murphy had people rolling in the aisles with Beverly Hills Cop and Coming to America. But beyond the fame, these two actually had something rare in Hollywood, a real friendship. They weren't just friendly on red carpets. They partied together, laughed like old buddies at industry events, and supported each other's careers without any of that fake Hollywood energy. It was the kind of bond one doesn't see often. Two guys from humble beginnings who made it big and never forgot the grind it took to get there. But then 1987 happened, and just like that, everything fell apart. The beginning of the end started during the making of Beverly Hills Cop 2. Stallone's wife at the time, Bridget Nielsen, had a part in the movie. She was impossible to miss, tall, blonde, and totally magnetic. And, of course, she was married to one of the biggest movie stars in the world. So one would think she'd be off limits, right? Well, sets can be weird places. Long days, high energy, lots of downtime between takes, people get close fast. And before long, whispers started making the rounds. People on set noticed Bridget and Eddie seemed a little too friendly. There were rumors, and in Hollywood, rumors travel fast and loud. Out of nowhere, things that used to feel normal started to feel weird. Every time Eddie cracked a joke and Sasha laughed, people were giving it side-eye. Every time they chatted a little too long at a party or were spotted together on set, suddenly it was proof something shady was going on. Whispers turned into headlines. Little comments turned into full-blown gossip. It didn't matter if there was any truth to it, what mattered was how it looked. And for Stallone, it looked bad. Think about it. Even if nothing was actually happening, just hearing your wife's name constantly being thrown around in stories like that with your friend, that'll rattle anyone. It's not just embarrassing, it's emotional, it's humiliating, and yeah, it's infuriating. Every time he picked up a tabloid or someone made a joke in passing, it chipped away at him. He couldn't just brush it off anymore. And Stallone's not the kind of guy to let stuff simmer. He's old school, straightforward. So he did what most Hollywood stars would never do, he skipped all the filters. No PR team, no publicist smoothing things over, no lawyers sending letters behind the scenes. He picked up the phone and called Eddie Murphy directly. And let's be real, it wasn't some polite, "Hey man, how've you been?" kind of call. This wasn't casual. This was personal. He was angry, hurt, confused, all of it. His voice probably cracked a little, maybe even raised. He needed answers, and he wanted them straight from Eddie's mouth. What's going on between you and Sasha? That was it. No sugarcoating. No beating around the bush. Years of friendship were suddenly hanging by a thread. One question and everything could change. Now imagine being on the other end of that call. Maybe Eddie was caught completely off guard. Maybe he already knew the rumors were out there. But either way, the pressure in that moment must have been intense. Two of Hollywood's biggest stars, once friends, now tangled in a deeply personal mess that had nothing to do with movie scripts or box office numbers. Eddie denied everything. He said nothing inappropriate happened. But when trust is shaken, especially in a marriage that's already a little rocky, words don't always fix things. Whether or not anything actually happened, Stallone couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. And now you had two proud, powerful men on opposite sides of a very messy situation. Stallone felt hurt and betrayed. Eddie felt blindsided that his friend believed the gossip. And just like that, a friendship that once seemed solid started to crack. Things only got worse once the press picked up on it. Hollywood loves drama, and a falling out between two A-listers? That's gold. People started whispering at parties. Reporters started digging. Trade magazines hinted at tension and fallout. The whole thing turned into a public spectacle. From that point on, they weren't just drifting apart, they were done. Calls stopped. They stopped showing up at the same parties. If they ended up at the same event, they stayed on opposite sides of the room. The warmth between them was gone, replaced with cold silence. Looking back, Eddie would later say how sad it was that things unraveled so quickly. Years of friendship, shared experiences, and good memories, all gone because of rumors and broken trust. It didn't help that the industry kept comparing them either. Who had the bigger box office weekend? Who had the better comeback? It was like the media turned them into rivals just to keep the story going. But here's the thing, both of them kept moving forward. Stallone kept doing his thing, and so did Murphy. They stayed stars, but that piece of their journey, the genuine connection they once shared, was lost. And no matter how much time passed, it never really came back. There's something really human about that. Fame, money, success. None of it protects you from the kind of heartbreak that comes when a friendship falls apart, especially one that was real. In the end, it wasn't just about what did or didn't happen on that movie set. It was about trust. Once that cracks, especially in a world as wild and image-obsessed as Hollywood, it's hard to fix, maybe even impossible. And so, what started as one of Hollywood's coolest friendships turned into just another story, one more what could have been, in a town full of them. Murphy's betrayal hit hard, but nothing could have prepared Stallone for the ego clash that nearly wrecked his most legendary role. What do you even do when a Hollywood legend shows up and tries to rewrite your entire movie? Number 2. Kirk Douglas. Back in 1982, Sylvester Stallone was on fire. Rocky had turned him from a guy cleaning lion cages at the zoo into a household name. The underdog story hit a nerve with people, and suddenly Stallone wasn't just a star, he was the guy. But he wasn't done yet. He had another character he wanted to bring to life. Someone darker, more intense, John Rambo. First Blood wasn't your typical action flick. Sure, there were explosions and stunts, but it had heart. Rambo wasn't a superhero, he was a broken man. A Vietnam vet who felt completely out of place in a country he fought for. The story tapped into real stuff like PTSD, isolation, and how society treats soldiers once the war is over. Stallone wasn't just acting. He was trying to say something. And after fighting so hard to keep control over Rocky, he wasn't about to let anyone water this one down. Then Kirk Douglas showed up. Now, Kirk Douglas was a big deal. We're talking Hollywood royalty here, Spartacus, Paths of Glory, 5 decades of classic roles. When he expressed interest in playing Colonel Sam Troutman, Rambo's former commanding officer and the only guy who truly got him, it felt like a win. A legend playing opposite Stallone? Seemed perfect. Until it wasn't. From the jump, Douglas made it clear, he wasn't just there to read lines. He'd read the book First Blood was based on and decided the movie needed a different ending. In the book, Rambo dies shot by Troutman. Douglas wanted that back in. Not suggested. Not discussed. Demanded. He thought the death gave it more weight, more drama. And, let's be real, it gave him the big emotional moment to go out on. Director Ted Kotcheff was suddenly stuck between a rock and a hard place. Stallone on one side, Douglas on the other. Stallone had been working on this for months. He wasn't just acting in it, he was helping shape the whole thing. He saw First Blood as the beginning of something bigger. Douglas, on the other hand, didn't care about future sequels. He wanted an ending that made him look great right now. And he wasn't subtle about it either. Douglas would literally talk about himself in the third person in meetings. Stuff like, Kirk Douglas wouldn't say this line. Or, Kirk needs a stronger motivation here. He brought his own rewrites to set, trying to reshape the movie around his version of the character. It was awkward, and it brought everything to a screeching halt. While Stallone and Kotcheff were trying to fine-tune the movie, they were now also trying to manage Kirk Douglas's ego. Long nights, script changes, endless back and forths. Everyone on set could feel the tension. It wasn't just two creative minds disagreeing. It was a full-on clash of worlds. New Hollywood versus old Hollywood. And neither side was budging. Stallone was especially frustrated. He'd fought too hard for control just to have someone else try to rewrite the story last minute. But Douglas kept pushing for that original ending, where Troutman kills Rambo over and over again. Eventually, Kotcheff had had enough. He sat Douglas down and basically said, "This is the movie we're making. This is the script you agreed to. If you don't want to do it, you can leave. No yelling, no drama. Just facts." And that's exactly what happened. Douglas walked. Now,